Okay, we're going to be covering a couple of chapters. One of them is going to be primary assessment, and the second one is going to be patient assessment. Patient assessment is super long, but basically that's one of the main things that we do is patient assessment to find out if there's anything wrong with the patient. Now, the first one, which is primary assessment, I've always considered it, what do you call it? A common sense thing. But then again, and I'm going to tell you a little story. When I was working in EMS, I was green, gung-ho, and I wanted to save everybody's life. I had a little red cape in back of me, and the wind would always blow it while I was standing. I wanted to be one of those hero things. So initially, and it's going to make a little bit more sense once we go along with this first chapter. What happened is that we got to the scene, and I hadn't, there was a car crash, and I saw the patient, boom, directly got my trauma bag and was trying to run towards him, while my partner grabs me by what very little hair I have left, grabs me and pulls me back. And he tells me, "What the hell's wrong with you?" Well, the patient. Yeah, but right next to the patient, don't you see that electrical wire that's sparkling? It's not a 4th of July thing. So, and it's one of those things that we develop what we call tunnel vision. And that tunnel vision usually impedes us from seeing anything else except what we want to see. But then I learned from, from my, I want to say my mistakes. I learned from my experiences. I mean, actually, if I get back in the truck right now and get into a car crash, first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use all my senses to find out if there's anything wrong. Like I'm going to see if there's a fire, I'm going to smell if there's gasoline or antifreeze or whatever it might be. I might, might want to touch the electrical wire, but I'm going to see the electrical wire type of thing. So it's one of those things that I want to say most of us are born with an innate, common sense thing, but then I met some people that I still don't know right now how they're still alive because they have no common sense. They're the type of people that will touch a hot stove and say, you know something, the stove is hot. And I'm thinking, well, why don't you remove your hand? Or at least switch your hand the other way so you can fully cook it. So even my jokes have something that you can learn from. Okay, I got one more person. So this first chapter is basically that, what we're going to be covering, which is primary assessment. I believe it's chapter 12. Okay, there you go. So let me just get it ready for you guys. Any questions so far? I mean, from previous classes? Let me see if I can diminish this. Oh my God. Vamos a ver. Oh, it's telling me I have a meeting. Guys, I got a new phone and life just became more complicated. It's like, the thing is, and I got a flip phone thinking that it might be easier. No, yeah. Why would it? Ando batallando trying to figure it out. Okay, so it's chapter 12, I believe. Yeah, because we finished airway management. There you go. With the scene size. Now, Garth, this is the first part of patient assessment. Okay, this is the first part that we're going to be dealing with when it comes to dealing with an actual call. And what I want to do is I want to see if I can show you something first. Okay, let me get this. Let me get this thing first, so you can actually see a call. Give me a few seconds. It would be I'm trying to look for the file on my computer, which is, it should be, if I can remember the name of the damn file. It was Virtual Chronicles, that's what it is called. There you go. So I'm gonna see if I can put one on. Let's do what, maybe this one. Yeah, and I'm gonna see if I could just show you the present, I mean the video itself. So let's see. Hardly ever talked, and then they disappeared into the darkness. Okay. Now you guys can't see that, right? Because I haven't put it on there.
No.
Just give me a few seconds. Where are you guys?
Hello.
Thank you. And let me diminish this. You guys are here. Okay, let me see if I can open it up for you guys. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and enlarge it a little bit. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and press play. Now, right here, what I did with these, I put the set of vital signs that we're gonna be dealing with, but let's deal with this. Now, these are actual calls. No, I decided to press something. Can you all hear it?
No.
Okay, give me. I know why you can't hear it. Give me a few seconds. I forgot to put this. I need to stop share. And I need to make sure that you guys can hear it. So I need to go in here and share computer sound. If I can find it, let me see. There you go. Okay, so let's play it. Let's start again.
Let's see here. Knock, knock. Hi. Hi, bud. Can we come in? Are you mom?
Grandmother.
Grandmother. Are you taking care of him today?
Yes.
Okay.
Mom's at work.
You feel okay? Do you have anything that hurts? Do you have any owies? No? Okay, good. What happened? Did you swallow something? Yeah? What'd you swallow?
Yes.
Did you swallow a battery? Yeah. Okay. Your belly doesn't hurt? Do you have a hard time breathing? A little bit? Okay. All right, buddy. Well, we're going to check you out real fast, okay? How long ago did he swallow the battery, would you say?
20 minutes ago.
Okay.
I went in the bathroom, but it was started putting two of my fingers down his throat.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Is
and
that
he-
the one,
and all
kiddo?
this was coming with this,
Do you eat
That's
that
the
one?
missing battery.
See if we can't find it, okay? These are called my ears. Goes right in here and I get to hear things. And I'm gonna listen to your back, okay? You just take some deep breaths. Let me see how big you can breathe in. Breathe in big and deep. You take a deep breath, there you go. Okay, you did such a good job, Grandma. So right now, his lungs sound good. He's got 100% oxygen in his blood. His pulse rate's right where it needs to be. You can see he's not in any sort of distress, anything like that. So it's not in his respiratory system, which is good. So we'll get on the phone though. We can call poison control. They can give us a little bit better direction on what they would like to
Right, 'cause it
do.
wasn't corroded.
We'll run him down. He's not in any sort of distress. His respirations were good. His lungs sound good. It's definitely not in his airway, which is our main concern. So a little bit of a peace of mind for grandma here. We also contacted poison control just to get a little bit more of a direction. They, have certain protocols that they go about. Poison control, say anything?
Yeah, they talked to the physician with poison control. They were just worried about the battery like turning sideways in the stomach and not being able to pass. So they recommended that he be transported so they could scope it and see if he could pass it or if they need to remove it.
Perfect.
Their main concern is if it turns sideways and doesn't pass, it could leak the internal acids from the battery.
Gotcha.
1, 2, 3.
So they want him to be transported to the hospital where, again, they'll be able to scope him and visualize that battery and see if maybe they need to extract it, or if it seems like it's in a good position to let nature do its course, we'll let him go ahead and pass it. Thanks, guys. Have a good night. Take care, buddy. Feel better, okay? You're gonna be okay. Can I get a thumbs up? There it is. I like it, pal. Good job, bud.
Okay. Now, the key thing about primary assessment, as soon as they got there, they assessed the situation. Okay. Now, this wasn't a dangerous call. It was, now, I can't understand how the kick, they said size C battery.
Yeah, it looked like a double A.
Yeah, but size C is big.
Yeah, sizes are big, yeah.
No, now he will not be able to pass that. Anyway, so what happened? They get there and they look at the scene. They don't tell you that, but they look at the scene, they look for an exit, they see if there's any danger to themselves or any danger to somebody, to their partners, and how many patients we have. Not only how many patients we have is, do we need to call any backup to help us out? And who did they call for backup?
Yeah, what do they?
It rhymes with poison control.
Poison control.
There you go. They call poison control to verify to see if what they can do. And and it's a 1-800 number. Anybody can call. So you can call them up, and then you can tell the hospital, or they can call them up, or both of you can call them up. So that's basically that's all that the primary assessment is all about, is trying to find out what the hazards are, if there's any dangers to you, and not only there's only danger to you, is there any danger to your partner? Like in my case, where there was a down electrical wire and whatsoever, right? So let's go start this chapter. Let me see. I could have gone you a little bit more exciting call, but you guys are not ready yet.
Hey, baby steps.
Baby steps, baby steps. Don't, let's not panic yet.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so it's chapter 12. And where are you guys? Okay, now you can see that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so again, patient is, primary or scene size up, which is before the primary assessment. The next chapter will be primary assessment, then maybe secondary assessment. So this is basically an overview that we're going to be covering today. It's going to be violence towards EMS personnel. It's gotten worse. And we really don't have much to protect us except for our stethoscopes and our wits. Personal protection precautions, determine the scene safety, determine the nature of the problem, and actually determining the number of patients. And we'll go over, basically a little bit more. The pre-hospital setting is is basically an uncontrolled environment. We don't deal with controlled environments. We try to set a control to them, but we are trained to be in uncontrolled environments. Like, what can actually affect your environment at this point? What do you think can affect your environment? Let me ask you guys.
Surroundings and people.
Yeah, surroundings.
Yeah.
People. How about the weather?
Yeah, weather.
Well, not only that, hazards.
Yeah.
It can be a lot of things that can actually, but you're trained to actually look for those things and either sidestep them, go over them, or control them. Failing to recognize the hazards of the scene has high costs specifically for you and your partner or maybe the patient. And remember, you also have to take care of the bystanders. Whenever there's a car accident, there's always going to be your rubberneckers and your
Oh
bystanders.
yeah.
You must also may actually choose attention to, you might actually pay close attention to the scene size up on every call. So you can see what's the danger. Now, don't, I think I remember telling you the story about when a DPS trooper crashed into a car in that little area that's past, I guess it's where, what's that place called? It's La Union, I believe, where they have that hill. And there was an accident there, and only because the dispatcher had told us and DPS that the call was actually about a mile further down when it was actually right after you get out of that hill. Now back then, we didn't have that. The hill wasn't shaved off. It was actually very steep, and once you couldn't see what was on the other side.
Yeah.
And this was about like maybe 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. So scene safety is a dynamic and ongoing process. And by dynamic, it's basically is that you constantly have to be looking for it. Just because you get there and say, something, there's no danger to me, I'm fine, blah, blah, blah. You get there, all of a sudden the situation can change. You might have looked at somebody the wrong way, or, especially, guys, you guys are gonna go to bars. And this is not to have fun. It's to actually pick up the people that were having fun. All you need to do is just look at somebody, and if they're drunk, they get mad. So you become a target to them. So basically, the scene size up has 3 basic goals: to identify the hazards that you might actually have, determine the nature of the problem. In other words, now when I say determine the nature of the problem, there's 2 things you can actually determine at this point. Is this a medical patient or is this a trauma patient? Major 2 breakdowns. In other words, did the guy fall down on a ladder, or did the guy was sitting on a sofa and started having chest pain, or maybe having a diabetic emergency type of thing? So you look for those 2 things: trauma or medical. And with trauma, it's mechanism of injury, and for medical, it's nature of illness, NOI or MOI. And we'll get a little bit more detail when we start dealing with the primary and secondary assessment. Determine the nature of the problem and recognize the need for additional resources. So in that case where I was going to the scene, we got to the scene, we needed to call CPNL or AEP to actually come shut down the electricity, because you cannot proceed to the scene unless it's safe for you to go there. Okay? And that's for your own personal safety. Evaluate the following components in a stepwise manner. Take the necessary standard precautions, and the necessary standard precautions basically is to wear gloves, goggles, maybe a face mask nowadays. Evaluate the scene for safety hazards. And this time you're going to be looking for gasoline, oil, a rabid dog, a guy with a gun, things like that. Determine the mechanism of injury and the nature of the illness itself. Are you going to determine, the guy's lying down, what history does he have? Is there insulin bottles around, their house? Does he have an EpiPen? Things you guys are going to be what my grandmother used to call, you guys are going to be la cucharas. Van a andar en todo. So basically, you need to look at everything in the room. Like, sometimes you might actually just see drug paraphernalia. If you see a gun, things that you look for that get your little spidey senses all hyped up. Then you determine how many patients you have. If you have one patient, you can deal with it. If you have two patients, you have to determine, are these critical patients or are they non-critical patients? Because you can basically take care of only one critical patient at a time. If you have 2 or 3 critical patients, you need to call for backup. And what determines a critical patient? If they're unconscious, having problems breathing, chest pains, or whatsoever, right? So also determine the need for additional resources. And what are the additional resources you might actually be able to get? I just mentioned a couple of them. Remember I mentioned AEP, the electrical, the gas company. What's another one? An additional ambulance, the fire
Yeah.
department, police department. These are the things that you actually look for. So violence towards EMS personnel must be a constant consideration in your scene size up and the safety precautions. Now, you have to realize, remember last year when we were having all these riots, EMS personnel actually got attacked, and we're there to help.
Yeah.
It's not whether, it's not something that we're there because we want to see what's going on. No. So what I would do is remember, protect yourself, protect your partner, and protect the patient, and protect the bystanders. In that order. Because your partner is going to protect himself, then he's going to protect you. So you're doubly protected by yourself and your partner. So in a recent study published in the Pre-Hospital Emergency Care, the authors actually found 69% of all EMS calls studied had experienced some form of violence towards the EMS personnel. Personal, now standard precautions, personal protective equipment, also known as PPE, ranges from examination gloves to complex breathing apparatus requirements and other gear. Do not use PPE. You must actually not, do not use PPE. You must not don't use protective equipment that you're not trained to use. Like in the fire department, they'll have what we call a self-breathing, the SCBA, which is self-breathing apparatus. If you're not trained to use it, don't. Hazardous materials, a lot of times they wear special equipment. Of course, the gloves, you have to wear them. You don't know where the patient's been. So use the same level of PPE being used by others, by other personnel such as firefighters and factory workers, where basically where you actually get called to. Now you get to see a scene right here. Where is the EMT personnel?
Waiting for it to be safe to.
Yeah, he's on the side with a backboard.
Yeah.
He's waiting for them to clear up because they're using equipment like the jaws of life that we don't know how to use unless you get trained for it, and you don't know what the bad things that can actually happen with that type of equipment. There's a lot of firefighters in this one. Well, actually, you can tell with the EMS personnel is he's the only one that doesn't have the protective headgear. But he's got a shield.
Yeah.
Okay, that's comedy right there. Let's go. Determine scene safety. Scene safety is an assessment of the scene to ensure the well-being of the EMT patient and bystanders. Ensure scene safety is a dynamic and ongoing process. In other words, once you get up there, the scene is safe. You don't stop checking. Because by dynamic, it means that it's constantly changing. As opposed to static, which is, there you go. It's like, being in a hospital, even though sometimes it's dynamic when it comes to the scene, it can actually be more static because it's a controlled environment. Scene safety and also requires the EMT to be exercise leadership and take control of the scene. Remember, I tell you guys are control freaks. You have to be. You have to have that mentality of a control freak. Dispatch information can actually help you anticipate safety needs, but it's only a starting point. Even though, well, I'm sorry, even en route, sounding dispatches can actually lead to dangerous scenes. And I've told you so many stories. I remember when I was working in EMS in Star County. We were at the hospital. And a lot of, the thing is that we had just finished a couple of calls, and it was just minor car accidents. The DPS troopers, I remember, used to show up, or police department used to show up at the hospital to get some more information, or just to talk with us, whatever, right? Back when I was working, we all basically worked as a unit. And I remember we get a call. We were cleaning the unit and we're chatting with these guys, and we get a call for an infant that is choking. So automatically we got geared up for, we're gonna go code 4 to this call. And basically the call was in Roma. Munsell, which was a DPS trooper back then, looks at me and they tells me, you know something, Bobby? That doesn't sound like a good area. And I don't think he's like, well, no area is good where a kid is choking, right? So, and I'm looking at him, so, okay, well, we'll give you a call if we need any help. So I wasn't driving. I had a friend of mine that was driving. So I was partnered up with a guy that was from Laredo. Oh no, it was Zapata, sorry. It was Zapata. So one guy from McAllen, one guy from Zapata, going to an area that we don't know the streets or anything. Back then we didn't have GPS. Okay. So basically we were heading that way. And I remember asking Ramon that, hey, do you know where this area is at? He goes, no, I have no clue. So normally when we didn't have a clue where the area was at, we would call the city's police. Like in that case, it was the Roma police. And we'll tell them, we're heading towards this address. Can you escort us in? Because they know everything that's in there. So we're driving close to Escobares. No, La Rosita. You know how there's like a hills on the side and, traffic from all over the place, right? So we're driving code 3 because it's a choking infant. So we're going, and I call Roma PD and they tell us, something, they switched me over to inner city, which is a radio frequency. And there's a guy, a police officer tells me, something, I have you under my scope, which basically means that I can see you. And I'll get in front of you so we can go ahead and get what do you call it? I can go ahead and lead you in. So basically, I'm gonna show you something which is gonna really freak you out because I remember I screamed like a girl. Let me see. Oh, I got you out of there. Where am I? I'm trying to find my, there you go. So basically we were traveling west. We're traveling west. The call is over here in Roma. And there's some curves, whatsoever, right? By the time you get to Roma. So we're around this area right here. Close to La Rosita, I believe. Of course, there's roads that go in and out, from all over the place. I remember there's one that goes over here, which is all Highway 83 and whatsoever, right? So this guy tells us, I got you under my scope. So I said, okay, We'll let you get in front of us. I said, don't worry, I'll get you, get in front of you. This guy's coming from over here, traveling at a higher speed than we are. I can't see him because I'm looking in front. Right? He's coming from my blind side over here on the side.
Mhm.
Have y'all ever seen the Dukes of Hazzard?
Yeah.
Okay. This guy, all we needed was just that General Lee
Nah, sí.
horn. Beep, 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 and this guy just
Sí.
like boom flies and lands in front of us, coming
Wow.
from this direction. Of course, this is me. I dropped the radio and my papers and everything, and my partner's just looking at me like, "Hey, how's it?" You didn't get scared? Say, yeah, but for a second, think of he crapped in his pants. And then the guy just led us to the call, right? So once we get to the call, we ended up in an area which basically, this is the road that goes straight to the bridge. We came in through here, and the call was right here.
Mhm.
It was an abandoned house. So we get there, we get down, and I walk towards the door, right? Thinking, the thing is, it was pitch black. The lights from the ambulance didn't make it any better. We left the strobes on. So we walked in there. At that time, Monso remembered where we were going, so he's heading this way also. So while I'm walking, let's say this is the house. While I'm walking this way,
Mhm.
I stumble on something right there, and I kept on walking. Picked myself and kept on walking. Went to the front door, knocked. This girl, which was not a lady, it was a girl. Well, older lady, but she didn't seem to be like the nicest person in the world.
Mhm.
Tells us, I go up to her, I'm sorry, did your guys call for 911 because we're here for the choking infant. And she looks at me like in disbelief, like, really? He's in the middle of the field right there, which is basically the front yard.
Mhm.
I actually tripped on top of him.
Oh.
Tripped, stumbled on top of his feet, whatever, and kept on walking. So I turned around, I was like, what? So we ran back to where the kid was. And I'm thinking while I'm walking back, real quickly, I thought, something, what type of mother would just leave the kid there?
Yeah.
Right? Nah, the guy was like a 22-year-old guy.
Oh.
Okay. And he wasn't choking. He was high on drugs. This house here was a stash house, a drug stash house.
Okay.
So when we got there, all I remember is, assessing the patient, and I didn't even bother checking for primary assessment. I mean, scene size up. We were already there. So then my partner starts tapping me on my shoulder, and there's like a circle of people, like zombies around us at that point, and they all came from this house. They were all little drug addicts or druggies, or like my wife says, drogóticos.
Mhm.
So my partner's tapping me on my shoulders. They say, "Hold on, let me just check his respirations." The guy was agitated, so he taps me again. Right, and the third time, instead of tapping my shoulder, he taps me on my face, and I looked at him, what? And he gets his light and just shines it, and we get to see all these eyeballs looking at us, all around 360 degrees.
Mhm.
And I looked at him, and I have my portable radio, and I switched it to channel 3, which is inner city, county 501, EMS, all garbled communication, right? And I said, to DPS Trooper Munsell. And he picks up and he goes, "I'm on my way." And while he's saying, "I'm on my way," he turns on the lights and sirens because now he knows that we're in a situation that we can't control.
Mhm.
So I swear, 3 cop cars showed up, including him, within about 45 seconds. As soon as they showed up, all these people that were around us, poof.
Como moscas,
Cucarachos
chingas, se fueron.
like cucarachos when you turn on the light,
Yeah.
and there was nobody left. And I mean, I was kind of rattled, right? And they got down. I mean, they came in screeching, and they got down and everything. And there was nobody left. Everybody just ran. And the police officers didn't even bother chasing them over. They just wanted us to be safe. But it was one of those that I made the mistake of not checking, because the information that the dispatcher had given me was that of a choking infant. And I was expecting
Yeah.
a 5-year-old, maybe less than that, choking on a battery or something. So remember, the scene can change, and it will change. And you have no control over it. You have to adapt to it. Okay, let's continue. So even the routine sounding dispatches can actually lead to a very dangerous things like what we did. Consider dispatch information. They can actually maybe give you some kind of hazards, can actually include they can give you some information, some hazards that can actually include angry or hostile patients or bystanders, hazardous materials, infectious diseases, crime scenes, or downed wire or power lines. I mean, somebody when I got into the scene could have told you, could have told them the more information that they gave us. Consider the need for additional specialized resources. Some scenes actually involve situations that require resources and training beyond what we are actually get trained for. Examples include hazardous materials, extrication, like what fire department will actually help us out, water rescue, what fire department can actually help us out, and high angle rescue, which basically fire department can help us out with that one. And high angle rescue is that, you're dangling from the second floor, between the second floor and third floor or whatever. And I know that there was one of my trainers, her name is Julie Benson. We used to get the weirdest calls with her. And I remember in one of the cases that we got there, this guy had fallen from the 3rd-story building onto a 2nd-story area where there was, what do you call it? Rebar. You guys know what rebar is, right?
Yeah.
Basically those thick wires that give the building shape or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But he fell in between that, luckily, because if he would have fallen and implanted himself, that would have been a different situation.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it was one of those where we had to go up there through these little devices that that the electrical companies use to raise you up to that level. And of course, me being a student, we're all like, of course, I was wearing my cape and everything, but it wasn't gonna help me fly. So at this scene, what do you notice?
EMS is waiting for a scene.
Okay, well, let's say there's a car right there.
There's
Fire
yeah,
department.
there's cops in the back, fire department.
And what's
Power
the-
line. Yeah, power lines are down.
Power lines, okay? What else you might notice is that this car might actually be leaking gasoline. And not only that, you're right next to a street
Yeah.
that might actually be that's also hazardous. I had a friend of mine who was working in the fire department. He was working with EMS and the fire department. When he wasn't scheduled to be in EMS, he was with the fire department as a volunteer. He's directing traffic because we didn't need any help, and he became a patient. You know how some of these trucks have these very long sight windows? I mean, mirrors.
Yeah.
To help him carry trailers or whatever. Well, the guy got too close to him and hit him on the back with one of them, going at about maybe 5 to 10 miles per hour. Knocked him down. So you have to be very careful. So you have to look out for all these things. Not only that, look at all this. What is this called?
It's grass. What's it called? The
Yeah,
buffalo grass or something?
It's grass. It's grass. What hides in grass here in Stark County?
Yeah.
Rattlers, animals.
Yeah.
So you might actually have to be very careful that you don't go into somebody's nest and get stung, bitten, or
Yeah. Can be
scared.
ants, bees, a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, that's another hazard that you really can't control. Okay. So consider also scene characteristics. Now, don't worry, guys. With time, you'll develop all these little spider tingling sensations, like your spider thingy that they call it. Consider scene characteristics. EMT safety is a primary importance. Your own safety, because let's say if you go to the call, let's say Jose goes to the call, and I'm partnered up with Jose, and Jose doesn't tell me, hey, there's a down wire, so I touch it and I go, zzz, zzz, zzz. My hair becomes an afro, and I go down to the floor. What happens then? I just became a patient.
Mhm.
I need to call 2 ambulances now. One to
Yeah.
pick the patient up and one to pick up myself. So then you're doubling up on resources that you might not have. So be very careful, guys. An injured EMT cannot provide emergency care, which, believe it or not, we try to, but no. Resources may actually be deviated from the patient in an injured EMT, and they're going to want to take care of you instead of whatsoever.
Mhm.
I know that I was told by one, after I stopped working in Stark County, we had a couple of guys that were working in EMS, and you guys know where the Tractor Supply is in those
Yeah.
areas? Okay, I'm gonna tell you. There's. Oh, did I go back? Yeah, I went back. It's if you're traveling from Roma, going this way. There's a Tractor Supply right there. My office is over here, but right here, there's a curve,
Oh yeah.
and then you can actually go to the hospital right there. Was an ambulance traveling this way, not emergency. They were just told at like 4 o'clock in the morning, hey, there's a patient waiting here. You guys need to transport him to McAllen. These guys are going now. Of course, they had been busy the whole day. Well, the driver dozed off right around this section right here. Went into a field that's right here. Let's say this is the ambulance. Right? And that ambulance flipped over, flew here, which I think there's like a 5-foot embankment at that area. Once you leave the expressway, flew, hit nose first, flipped this way. And once it flipped from head to toe, it was from the head area to the buttocks area. And it flipped 3 times.
Oh.
Now they ended up being on their side. And I remember the driver was on top, and he was a heavy set guy. I was thinking about me like maybe 300 pounds. The guy in the bottom was normal shape, I guess, but he was an old gentleman. And his first words were, "Esta pinche mugre nunca paró," according to what I heard. Okay. So the other guy is now hanging on top of him, with his arms dangling, and he's looking at him. And this guy tells him, do not remove your seatbelt. Because if he did, he would have fallen on top of him, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they both kicked out the front windshield and eventually got out of the truck, right? EMS showed up. A secondary unit showed up, gets there, and basically tells him, oh my God, let me call the dispatch. let me call the, what do you call it? The supervisor. So she calls the supervisor. She gets back into the ambulance and it tries to leave. And the guy told us, like, hey, we're your patients now. You can't leave us. So I don't know, I'm telling you, you need to be very careful, especially when they overwork you. Managing patients on roadways, places, EMTs can actually add extreme risk, because I mean, of course, not all traffic is being controlled, wait for police to enter the scene before you actually try to get in. Okay, especially if it's volatile, or there's any type of danger to you. They can also tell you, it's a crime scene. Hey, don't go to that area, because then you'll become part of the scene, and then you're going to be questioning what were you doing there. Consider scene characteristics. Bring your portable radio with you. Call for help from appropriate agencies, and actually remove yourself from the scene if it becomes very hazardous to you. Crash scenes. Now, the key thing about crash scenes, of course, you can drop off a lot of bad things like gasoline, antifreeze, whatsoever. Always, you guys know what the smell of antifreeze is?
Oh yeah.
It smells like, what does it smell like?
Como rotting steel or something like that.
And it smells like, it smells like pancake syrup.
Yeah, well, yeah, but maybe it smells weird. Like, because actually, me se andaba calentando el car like a couple weeks ago, and it smelled
Well,
like that. Se tiró el antifreeze, and then like a hot, así el antifreeze, olía
Yeah.
like it smelled bad.
Now, when it smells like metal is because you didn't put antifreeze, you put water.
Yeah.
So anyway, if you smell that, what is it that your little tingling sensation should tell you? That motor fluid
It's
is like maybe 250
Yeah, it's
degrees.
hot.
It can burn you.
Oh yeah.
So you get there and you might actually, make it burn because of that.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, is the vehicle stable? I know, and I was guilty of actually going to the scene of an accident, jumping inside the car without it being stable, and it rolled to the side. And I was trapped in there until they can actually take me out. So be very careful. Don't be gung ho like me.
Yeah.
If you cannot, if not, you can actually, if not you safely make it it's stable, then you have to call the fire department. And they got the choice to actually make it stable, believe it or not. We'll go over those later on and with ambulance operations. Or actually extricating patients. Are there any power lines involved? Guys, if you hear zzz, 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 there should be some power line involved somewhere along the way. What hazardous materials do you see here?
And that's one time.
I'm sorry?
Power lines are down. The pole.
Yeah, the
the
pole's actually
snow,
is dangling.
the snow, maybe the branches of the trees, like
There
they
you
might
go.
be broken or something.
Well, the branches
Or
themselves,
something by the weight of the snow, they can break.
well, not only that, they weigh a lot more.
Yeah, sí, por eso. By the weight del snow.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
the water freezes and it expands, so it kind of
Yeah.
cracks everything open. But I've actually read where one of these branches has fallen on top of a car and completely obliterates it, makes it flat like a pancake.
Yeah.
I don't know if you notice I mentioned pancake like 3 times already. That means I'm hungry.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit hungry. So,
Yo también ahorita que me traen.
pues dile que me traiga para acá también. No es que no sean tamales. Anyway,
Yeah.
hazardous materials. You might actually find these. Now, this is what we call a hazmat suit. Okay.
Mhm.
And you have to be trained on how to put it on safely. Okay. This is not as elaborate. I mean, this is more elaborate than the biohazard suit.
Mhm.
Okay. But in this one, you actually have a respirator in the back, or now you have filters right here so it can prevent you from getting any toxic substances. Now, if this was radioactive material, this ain't gonna help you.
Mhm.
So you need to find out what exactly is that is endangering you or the patient. What do you see here? Well, it's not actually a crime scene, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So it's tapered off, and then what do you call it? Police department will escort you in. In this one, what do you see here? Car crash and overpass.
Yeah.
Damn thing is hanging upside down. Well, not only that, what is
Mhm.
this on the side?
Yeah, the material, the bed del truck.
Yep.
Quién sabe qué material
Not only that,
está
you might actually get some
and all that.
evil trolls coming out of under the what do you call it? Under the bridge.
Yeah.
So you need to be very careful too with this type of now in this type of situation, the gas tank on this, if you notice, it's on this side.
Yeah.
Even if it's diesel, even though it's not supposed to be flammable, you still need to be very careful because you never know.
Mm-hmm.
Because even with gasoline, the gasoline itself is not flammable. It's the gas it produces that's flammable.
Yeah.
Crash scenes. Are there any jagged metal that might actually cut you?
Mm-hmm.
Are there undeployed airbags? Now, I have not. I've never gotten hit by an airbag. Well, except when I got into an accident. But while you're in there, I know a friend of mine, the airbag blew while he was trying to take the patient out.
Oh.
And I remember in one of them, there was a car accident where this lady was saved by the airbag.
Mhm.
But my partner started laughing when I was assessing the lady because it wasn't that bad of an accident, right? But he keeps on telling me, hey, check this out. And he points at the steering wheel, and I looked at the steering wheel, and the airbag had been deployed. And her face, because she was wearing that much makeup, was
Yeah.
imprinted,
Was printed in the bag.
and on the bag. And I almost lost it right there.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's those that you're seeing like this, and you're just shaking because you don't want to laugh out loud. And you're like,
Parecía un Wilson la airbag.
yeah. And you're like,
Parecía un Wilson
I
la
don't know.
airbag.
I turned around and I looked at the airbag, started asking it questions. So be very careful with airbags because even if you disconnect the battery, they can still be deployed. Is there any fuel leaking? Now I got trained to smell for fuel or antifreeze. So guys, you guys know what gasoline smells like.
Yeah.
So if there's a scene of an accident nowadays, there's very few cars that are carbureted because if a car's overturned or whatsoever, you're going to be leaking fuel through the carburetor. But everything is fuel injected, but you could still get gasoline being spilled.
Uh-huh.
Is there any fires which you can actually see or smell, or the hazardous materials involved, which you can actually look at the trailers or whatsoever, depending on the type of vehicle that you carry, that you go actually take care of. Crash scenes, protection from moving traffic, to reduce the incidence of being struck by traffic, wear what they call the yellow jackets with or orange jackets with yellow stripes that are reflective, which is the ANSI approved. Limit your time at the scene and also shut down traffic on the roadway so it doesn't become a hazard to you. Crash scenes, protection from moving traffic also to reduce the incidence of being struck by traffic. Place flares on the or cones. Be very careful that if you put flares, make sure there's no gasoline around. Place vehicles strategically so that can actually protect you from you getting hit instead of your vehicle getting hit. And do as much work as possible out of the traffic flow. So the key thing also you have to realize, and I'm going to tell you this one, there was a study that was made a few years ago, I'm talking about decades ago, that drunk people are attracted to red lights. So if you park your ambulance before the scene of an accident to protect you and you leave those flashers on, they're going to be attracted to it and they're going to crash into the back of the ambulance. So be very careful with that because I don't know why, I don't understand why, but they are attracted to red lights and they go. That's why our police officers get hit because they have their lights on and they're standing right next to the car, and boom.
Yeah.
Crash scenes, to reduce the incidence of being struck by traffic. Don't turn your back on moving traffic. Don't jump highway dividers to provide emergency care. And reduce unnecessary scene time or lighting that can actually distract or impair visibility by traffic, by a traffic that's coming. Now, the other thing that, that you have to realize, I mean, whenever there's an accident you're going to stay there like a while, there's always going to be a secondary or maybe a tertiary accident because of the rubberneckers. También no conozco ese fulano de tal y boom, they hit the car in front. Consider considerations, crash scenes, protect from moving traffic to reduce the incidence of being struck by traffic. Turn your wheels off parked emergency vehicles so they can actually are actually pointed away from the scene. So when they hit it from the back, they can actually go the opposite way. Avoid stopping and on standing water or standing between vehicles, because if they hit the vehicle, you're going to get crushed in between two vehicles. Some resources, some rescue scenes actually require specialized training and equipment, chemical and biological and nuclear weapons, heights, the natural disasters, and underground areas, which is a confined space. Ice rescue. Now, we're not trained here for ice rescue. Why?
There's no ice stores
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. So
No cold weather.
I mean, you might actually be able to walk towards the area, but you might actually fall through. So always have a rescue rope. And I think what I remember that training that I had was basically you have to walk on all fours for the simple reason that if you stand straight up, you're putting a lot of pressure in one area, but if you're actually crawling, it's a wider area so it doesn't crack. Moving water rescues also, you have to be specially trained for these. I think this is the top of a house. And we actually dealt with a couple of times where we actually do water rescues. I remember there was one when the hurricane came in, but went up north. It went towards the San Antonio, Laredo area. Now what happens is that we didn't get almost no rain whatsoever, but it stayed stationary in either Amistad or somewhere along the way to where they had to release the water. And this was, I believe, was 1990s, I believe, or early 2000s. The Rio Grande actually over flooded. I know that you know where not Citizen State Bank, but BBVA Bank is.
Yeah.
So, right where the boulevard is, where they have put all the Christmas stuff for the city and the courthouses and well, that's the courthouse is uphill from that area where the bank is. Right in back of that first row of houses that you get to see there after the bank, there's like a 15-foot drop of where the river used to be.
Oh.
It was flooded all the way up to there.
Wow.
So, and I remember, I mean, because even McAllen got flooded on South, was it South 23rd? Yeah, it was South 23rd. There was a couple of areas there that they didn't plan ahead and they just got flooded. We could only see the top part of the stop sign. Anyway, so you need to be trained to be able to rescue these people. If you don't know how to swim, don't bother.
Yeah.
So, consider other resources needed. Collapse cave-ins. storage tanks or vats. Was it silos? I think I told you that there was a couple of silos in the Stark County area, Rio Grande City, back of the in back of the stadium, the football stadium. And but they removed them already. And
Oh,
farm equipment, man, if you don't know how to use farm equipment, don't even get you get entrapped in with this killer machines. There's special training for it comes to farm equipment. Other rescue scenes, unstable surfaces and slopes. Remember to secure the patient to the hillside. Actually be sure that vehicles that have gone underwater, or sorry, over embankments actually have been secured. Beware of loose rocks and stones that may actually be knocked down to your position. Now we do have a lot of hills in Stark County.
yeah.
Other resources, retrieving a patient from swimming or several attacks can be difficult and should never be attempted alone. Rescue is in open waters, specialized techniques that rescuers actually training, or actually require some type of training for you to actually do this. And rescue in moving water is complicated because of the current itself. Other resources, scenes such as tanker spills, pipeline ruptures, and heavy smoke conditions require specialized assistance. Confined spaces can actually also require specific type of training. And toxic environment may actually cause people within it to actually suffer from similar symptoms. Like with the second one, which is basically confined spaces, we're talking about if you have to get into like a drainage area, and you're there, and there's not enough air going in there, there might be an accumulation of carbon dioxide. That's going to affect you really bad. Clandestine drug operations, like where they make meth and all these other places, look for chemicals such as epinephrine. Well, it's not epinephrine, it's ephedrine, which is the one that they use to actually cut some of the stuff. Pseudoephedrine, iodine, hydrochloric acid, and anhydrous ammonia also. If you actually are not trained to take to actually make the environment safe, then you should let somebody that's actually trained to do it for you. Crime scenes. Remember that ensuring your own safety when you get at the crime scene, because the shooter might still be around. Wait for the police to actually arrive and secure the scene before you actually attempt to enter. If you arrive at such a scene and feel uneasy, then go back to the ambulance and basically get somebody to clear you to go in there. Crime scenes. Arriving at the scene, turn off your sirens and emergency lights by by arriving discreetly and not alarming anybody. If you actually arrive at such a scene and you feel uneasy, it's that stomach little cramping that you feel, then make sure that there's no threat that exists. And park 2 to 3 houses away from the actual scene itself. Consider characteristics, also crime scenes. Study the crowd to make sure that it's not violent for you to actually get involved in it, or they might actually get you involved in it.
Mm-hmm.
Assess the crowd, so do not allow yourself to be pulled into the chaos itself. And if the crowd actually seems hostile, retreat back to your ambulance. Okay. Consider scene characteristics. Walk on the grass, not on the sidewalk. Hold your flashlight beside you, not in front of you. Walk in line in a single file so they don't get to see the person in the back. And note places of concealment, in other words, areas where somebody can actually hide and jump at you. And look at windows and corners and actually stand to the side of the door when you knock. If you're standing right in front of the door, if somebody shoots the door where you're knocking, you're gonna get hit. So be very careful with that too. If you your first priority is to actually remains protecting yourself and your partner. Be aware of the perpetrators that actually still might be in there, and ensure that the police have been called and actually follow their protocols or their instructions. Okay. At the secure crime scene, limit the number of responders that are going to be there. Do not allow bystanders to touch or disturb the scene itself. Introduce yourself to the patient carefully, and the patient may actually be or may actually be the perpetrator, the one that caused the act, the crime scene. Have the EMT keep watch of the area, and your task is to actually your partner. Your task is to render medical assistance, and where appropriate, assist the police if they ask you to. Do not disturb any evidence. Do not touch or move suspected weapons. Wear gloves the entire time, so you don't leave your fingerprints also. Not only that, but you don't leave them there. Do not cut the clothing where there's a bullet wound or knife stab, because you're going to be messing around with the evidence. Cut at the point away from the rope. Do not actually burden patients with crime questions. Notice who is at the scene when you actually arrive. Excuse me. Bless you. And this one, it's telling you right here, stretch your arm out and put the light to the side. So if they're going to try to shoot up where the light is, and if it's dark, and you're going to be pulling that to the side, because if you put it in front of you, they're going to hit you. And always walk in a single file, so you don't become a larger target. And when you knock, always put yourself on the side in case they decide to shoot at the door, you don't get hit. Barroom scenes, people consuming alcohol can actually make a scene volatile. The dark atmosphere can actually create challenges for you to see, and comments and questions can easily be misunderstood by somebody else, especially if they're drunk. Do not put your back on the patrons. Never give your back to anybody. Do not respond to verbal threats. Just take care of the patient. That's what you're gonna need to do. Okay. Car passengers, park at least one car length behind the vehicle, which actually, with the wheels turned away from the scene itself. Try to reflect your high beams off the rear view mirror of the cars, and write down the license plate and remember the license plate number and leave it in the ambulance itself, just in case. Okay. Note the number of positions of occupants. You might get more than one patient. They might actually been thrown out. Be alert for unseen occupants. Have your partner open the passenger door, side door first. Stay behind the center post. And when the center post is actually post B, if you might actually must retreat back to the vehicle quickly as about 100 to 150 yards away. Protect your patient from environment and attention of bystanders. And if you are unable to control these factors, move the patient to the ambulance and take care of them right there. Do not leave the patient behind. If hazards to the bystanders cannot be eliminated, remove the bystanders from the scene. And keeping the crowd out of the way can actually be challenging because they just want to be there. Now, this one seems more of a control situation, but look at the crowd.
Yeah.
I mean, they can easily just run and hit you on the head with something. So always
Or
remember,
throw stuff.
yeah, throw stuff. I mean, they don't look violent, but you don't wanna risk it.
Yeah.
Okay, create a workable environment, provide light, consider moving furniture, consider moving the patient, maintain an escape route, pay attention to bystanders, and anticipate rather than react to the situation. So always think, listening, it might turn bad. Where's the closest exit, or where's my ambulance is at? Control the scene, stay calm, use the tact and diplomacy, be flexible, be open-minded, be alert, and be compassionate towards the patients and bystanders. You never know. Maintaining situation awareness. Scene size up is a dynamic and ongoing, and remain vigilant also. Remember, it can change from 1 second to the next. Maintain scene awareness and as well as patient awareness. Now, determining the nature of the call. The patient problem may actually be a trauma or medical, like I mentioned earlier. It might actually be something to where you might actually been a car accident, and we might actually show up to the house where somebody's complaining of chest pain. Trauma is a physical injury and caused by external force. A medical condition is brought on by some type of illness. Dispatch information that starts you out on the call, but it actually can be incomplete or inaccurate. Okay, determine the mechanism of injury. MOI basically stands for mechanism of injury. M for mechanism, O of injury, I is how the patient was actually injured. Consider the strength, direction, and nature of the forces that were involved. Use a mechanism of injury to develop an index of suspicion. And what index of suspicion is that if I get to hit somebody on the head with a bat, I'm going to suspect maybe cranial trauma, maybe C-spine. So, it's basically, that's the high index of suspicion. And then we're involved in the car crash, then you have to determine what type of car crash it was. Was it a side impact, frontal impact, rear impact, a rollover, and whatsoever, right? So that should tell you, we'll get into those later when it comes to trauma, and how the mechanism of injury is suspected. Consider dispatch information and examine the scene itself. Some situations should create a high index of suspicion, such as falls. And the fall has to be from a certain height, more than 20 feet for adults. Motor vehicle cycle crashes, in other words, motorcycle crashes are always going to be very bad. And you have to have a very high index of suspicion. Recreational vehicle crashes like four-wheelers and whatsoever, or contact or recreational sports like soccer, football. What would be another dangerous one? Bowling. You have a 20-pound ball falling on your head. That's dangerous.
Oh yeah.
Some situations should actually be create a high index of suspicion. Pedestrians struck by cars also. If there was a car accident that hit a pedestrian. Explosions, stabbing, and shootings and burns. When we're dealing with explosions, we're going to go over that there are actually at least 3 injuries that are involved with an explosion. 4 injuries, I'm sorry. And we'll go over those when we're dealing with that. Falls. The distance that the person fell is very important. Where did they land? Did they land on the pillow or did they land on concrete? And body part that was actually impacted first, like if it's the head or the arm or your torso or your butt. Motor vehicle crashes. The type of impact influences the patient, injury to the patient's head, head-on or frontal impact. You have rear-ended impacts, side or lateral impact, which is we call it T-bone, and rotational impact, which is rollovers and rollover, of course. Rotational is when you go around, and rollover is when you go flipping all over the place. Significant impacts, deformity of the vehicle, more than 20 inches. Now, I normally go with 12 inches. If there's a car crash and I notice that the indentation was about a foot, in this case 2 feet, then I consider it a very strong, impact. Intrusions into the passenger compartment. I always say the car hit on the passenger compartment, what got thrown in whatsoever. Displacement of the vehicle axle and rollover. Very important. Significant impacts. Impact marks on the windshield caused by the patient's head. We call that a spider web crack on the windshield. And sometimes they'll have skin, hair, and whatsoever. So always look for those. Missing rear view mirror, basically was knocked down. Collapsed steering wheel and broken seat. Now the steering wheel is actually meant to collapse within itself. So look for that. Significant impacts, side door damage, cracked or smashed dashboard. Now there's 2 types of accidents that you're going to be dealing with. One is up and over, down and under. Up and over is when the person hits, the person goes over the steering wheel. Down and under is when they go under. And the injuries that you get with those are different. And we'll get more detail into the type of injuries. But just know that with the up and over, you're going to have the head hearing the windshield and cracking it, or the steering wheel actually hitting the upper chest and makes it collapsing some of the lungs. And the down and under, you're going to have your knees hitting the lower dashboard, which might actually cause your pelvis to actually get fractured. And use of restraints, devices, deployment of the airbags. If the airbags were deployed, it was a significant hit. Make sure that they were wearing a seatbelt also. Remember, seatbelts are there to save your life. They're not there to prevent you from getting injured. So seatbelts can actually cause a lot more damage. Motor vehicle crashes, occupant ejection. If the person actually got ejected from the vehicle, remember, and we're going to go over this in chapters. When a person hits, let's say a person's driving a car and he hits a tree. The first impact is the car actually hitting the tree. The second impact is you hitting the car. And the third impact is your internal organs hitting your internal barriers, which is your chest and whatever, right? So there's 3 crashes in one collision. When you're dealing with somebody got thrown out of a car, you double it up. Because the first impact would be where the vehicle hit the tree. Second impact would be where you hit the vehicle, like your steering wheel or whatever, or the dashboard or the windshield. Third impact is your internal organs actually hitting your internal cavities. Now, if you get thrown out, then there's another impact when basically you hit the floor. And the second and the fifth impact would be when your internal organs hit when you actually stop. So it's a deceleration, acceleration, deceleration type of thing. So just make sure that occupant ejection is very important, because if they got thrown out, then. Now, in this case, I believe that it's a rollover, and there might have been an impact, but they really kind of tore up the car apart. Motorcycle crashes, document the impact type and whether the patient was wearing a helmet or not. You have head-on, angular impact, ejection, and leaving, or it's basically what they call laying down the bike. And laying down the bike, what happens is that you basically drop your bike and you slide with your bike and have the motorcycle hit, not you hit the other car. It's actually motorcyclists are actually trained for this. How many of you guys are motorcyclists?
I want to be, but I don't have one.
Just be careful, because
Yeah, no me dejan.
same thing with me. I wanted a motorcycle when I was a kid. After holding my breath for about 20 years, actually I think I was like 12 years old. They got me a dirt bike, a used dirt bike. And I flew and fell on my back with that motorcycle. All I remember is waking up and all the air had been knocked down.
Oh yeah.
I sold the bike for $50. Recreational crashes, rollover, and crush injuries are common. Severe impacts with trees, rocks, and other vehicles. If you have any questions, just tune into the show. What's it called? They show it on
Rescue.
MTV. No, they showed it on MTV.
Oh, MTV.
The one where the guy is constantly showing all these accidents and whatever. Ridiculousness.
Ah, sí.
You get to see a lot of impacts there.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've seen that show.
Okay. Determine the mechanism of injury. Penetrating trauma with cause for shooting and stabbings. Expose and assess the injuries, or for injuries. Remember, a trauma patient is a naked patient, so you have to expose them. Expose unresponsive trauma patients to look for penetrating trauma, and log roll and check for actually the posterior body. Always remember, when we're dealing with patient assessment, we're gonna turn you to check the anterior, and then log roll them and check the posterior to make sure that there's nothing. At this point, you're gonna see exposed a gunshot wound. Normally, the entrance wound's a lot smaller than the exit wound because of cavitation. So make sure that you find an exit wound. Blast injuries, you're gonna have different injuries occurring from that. The pressure wave that hits when it first explodes, the flying debris. I'm sorry, the flying debris. It's debris. God, I can say. Then you have the patient being propelled to the ground with other objects, and then the burns that occur because of the explosion. determine the nature of illness, not a diagnosis, but an attempt to actually narrow the nature of the problem. And this is called differential diagnosis.
Mhm.
Consider information from dispatch, the patient's family, and members of the, and clues that you find at the scene. Like, let's say you walk into the room and you find insulin bottles. Would you suspect that somebody in the house is a diabetic? Or they just collect insulin for the hell of it?
Almost. Yeah.
The other one would be EpiPens or medications. You know,
Mhm.
all of you have a phone nowadays that's a smart device. You can actually look for the medication, and she gives you a hint on what the patient might be actually. Like if you have a hypertensive medication, then you turn around and say, you know something, somebody here must be hypertensive. So it's like a cheat sheet note for it comes to diagnosis. To determine the nature of illness, consider the following clues: the presence of medications, drugs, and oxygen, the position and condition the patient is found, and the environment. So, and by the position, we're dealing with the tripod position that can actually help them breathe better. They're having a respiratory issue. If there is multiple patients, call for additional help. When indicated, activate your multi-casualty incident plan, and for multiple patients, perform triage. And triage basically is all it is. Triage is a mechanism that we use to actually determine the severity, how bad the patient is at. And we'll go over what triage is. So this is the end of this chapter. Let's go and take a little break, and then we'll come back, guys.
Okay.
Okay, let me see if I can actually pause it. Okay, we'll continue with the next chapter. Give me a few seconds to load it up. Which is chapter 13. Okay, and this is basically your patient assessment chapter. Okay. And this one, basically, this is a technique, it gives you a lot of information. This chapter, it's a very long chapter, so we might not be able to finish it today. But it gives you a breakdown on how to actually check the patient and use some of the acronyms that we've already learned. So what are the acronyms that we've learned on patient history?
Patient history. Okay.
It should be forged into your memory already.
Yeah.
AVPU, remember AVPU? The other one would be the acronym of OPQRST. And the other one, we're missing one, which is your samples.
Mhm.
What does sample stand for? Signs and symptoms?
Signs and
is the A?
symptoms.
What does the A stand for?
Medication.
Well,
Oh,
the A,
allergies.
allergies, and then medication.
Medication.
P, pertinent,
P.
pertinent past history.
Pertinent past history.
L is last oral intake. And E is events. What were you doing
Events.
when this hit? Then remember OPQRST. O is onset.
Onset.
P is pertinent
Pertinent
history.
history. What type accused? What type of pain?
Yeah.
Radiate.
The quality of the pain, and then
Yeah.
OPQR is radiation. S is severity from a scale from 1
Severity.
to 10.
And time and how long or
Yeah.
since when or
Now, we actually went over another one when it comes to trauma patient, and that's DCAP BTLS. And DCAP BTLS stands for deformities, eviscerations, actually, deformities, contusions, abrasions, penetration punctures, burns, tenderness, lacerations, and swelling. So this chapter, these are things we're going to have to memorize and use them every single time we do a patient assessment. All decisions about patient care and transport are actually based on an accurate, thorough patient assessment. And also what you find is what you treat. Assessment includes scene size up, which is what we just went over, the primary assessment and the secondary assessment. We're going to go over primary assessment first. We just went over scene size up. What do we look for? How many people do we call? Who do we call? How many patients were there? Any hazards or whatever? That's scene size up. Primary assessment is your airway, breathing, and circulation. So we'll go over that one. Well, we're gonna go over scene size up again. Scene size up is a dynamic process that actually continues throughout the call. Oh, it doesn't stop once you check it. You have to continually be checking it. There are operational and patient care aspects of it. Determining the mechanism of injury, which is MOI, or nature of illness, which is NOI, and determining the number of patients in the beginning of the patient assessment process. So basically, take your standard precautions, protect yourself, protect your partner, protect the patient, and protect bystanders. Evaluate scene hazards and ensure scene safety. Determine the mechanism of injury or nature of illness. establish the number of patients, and ascertain the need for additional resources. Primary assessment, okay? Primary assessment is basically the control factor that we have over the airway, breathing, and circulation. The process are to determine the the nature of the problem, to manage immediate life threats. And the immediate, whenever you hear immediate life threats when it comes to patient assessment, the first thing that should come to your mind, immediate life threats, is ABC.
Mhm.
If their airway is not open, they're not breathing, and if they're not breathing, eventually the pulse is gonna go away. So those are immediate life threats that you can fix. If the airway is not open, what are you gonna do?
Make it open.
Make it open. If they're not breathing, what are you gonna do?
Make him breathe.
Make them breathe. Now, if the airway is open, not open, can they breathe?
No.
No. If the airway is not open, can you ventilate them?
No, tampoco.
Nope, you can't. So that's why you need to take care of the airway first. Open it up, make sure it stays open, and then the breathing to make sure air is going in and out, and then you check for circulation. Okay. The primary assessment steps are the following. Form a general impression of the patient. So when you walk in, the primary assessment, primary survey is basically, is the guy awake or is he unconscious? So you check for mental status, which is your AVPU. Are they alert? Are they alert to verbal stimuli? Are they alert to painful stimuli, or they're unresponsive? Assess their, I think it's assess their airway, not way. Assess their breathing, and assess oxygenation, and assess circulation, and establish patient priorities. If you can't control any one of these, airway, breathing, or circulation, then this is a load and go patient. And by load and go is a patient priority. We can't stay here and play with the patient. We need to take them to the hospital. Now, if their airway is open, they're breathing okay, and they're all awoke and everything, then you can actually, we can stay here for a little bit and deal with patient assessment. But if their airway is not open, they're unconscious or anything like that, take them to the hospital. Okay. Any life-threatening conditions identified in the primary assessment is immediately treated before moving on to the secondary, the next portion, which is the patient assessment, which is your secondary assessment. So you have to control the airway, breathing, and circulation. And basically, this is a chart that kind of dictates on the process that you go through. So you guys can read it up, just follow it through, and we'll break it down later on during this chapter. Okay, develop a general impression of the patient's condition. Usually, as you actually approach and determine if the patient is stable or unstable. Determine a chief complaint, what are they complaining of, and actually observe the environment. Estimate the patient's age, note the patient's sex, determine whether the patient, now with this one, would note the patient's sex nowadays, it's gonna be weird.
Yeah.
Okay, determine whether the patient is trauma or medical, obtain the patient's chief complaint, and identify and manage immediate life threats. You know what includes in your immediate life threats, guys?
Immediate.
Airway, breathing, and circulation. Those are your immediate life threats. That's all the things that you can actually control and fix. You look at this patient, does she look alert?
Yes.
Sort of.
Well, she looks pissed,
Yeah.
but she's awake, right? She's standing up.
Yeah.
So she's breathing. Okay, so basically it's like the general impression. Once you get to the door, determine general impression of the patient. Are they awake? They're unconscious or what? Are they having problems breathing? With this guy, what do you notice? Is he awake?
Yeah, he's awake,
But
but he's kind of tense or
well,
Like-
look at the environment. Let's click on this one.
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Look at the environment. Remember, over respiratory emergencies, he's got pursed lips. It might be that he wants to kiss
Yeah.
you. Might be that he wants to kiss you, or maybe not. But what position is this? This is what we call the tripod position. They lean forward so they can breathe better, and they purse their lips so they can get more air in. This guys, I'm introducing you to the tripod position, which we already talked about. They look like a tripod.
Mhm.
Yep. Not only that, what do you notice on the table?
In the asthma inhaler.
There you go. What else do you notice? Oh, that's it, right?
That's about it.
This is a napkin, right?
Yeah.
Because there was one picture that had I hadn't noticed it, and it had a cigarette. An ashtray. You don't see an ashtray in this one.
Mm-hmm.
This guy's conscious or unconscious?
Semi-conscious, but it's
Well, is his eyes
Yeah.
open?
yeah.
So he's breathing, but you notice this. So airways control, breathing is, I guess, you would have to determine whether he's breathing or not. But you can notice a noticeable mechanism of injury
Injury.
here. He shot himself with a nail gun, I guess. No, I'm sorry, with
Probably se cortó con la grinder.
yeah. ¿Por qué? Por sonso.
Hey.
What do you notice here?
Unresponsive.
Unresponsive. What do you notice here? On the bed. Well, he fell off the bed. He's what we call in the fetal.
No se alcanza a ver muy bien. Fetal position, yeah.
Yeah, he's in the fetal position, so that means that he's got abdominal issues or he hurt himself really bad. Okay, so those are things that you notice when you walk into the room. Those things that will tell you that he's awake or not awake. Self restrictions introduced. Introduction to spine motion restriction. And spine motion restriction is something that you will have to do whenever you might suspect that the person might have a C-spine injury. Like in this case, you think this guy might actually have a C-spine injury, that he hurt his cervical collar and cervical spine. Well, he fell off the bed. He
Probably
might.
from the fall.
Yeah. I mean, this bed looks kind of tall.
Yeah.
Well, he was jumping like a kid
Yeah.
and he flew off.
Yeah, it is. And
Le
you don't know
pegó
what.
el cráneo en la cabeza, like in ridiculousness, and
Yeah.
cayó pa'l suelo. You never know.
Yeah. Scorpion
Yeah.
fall.
Oh my God, I've seen so many of those.
Yeah.
Now, spine motion restriction. Now, self-restriction. In other words, if you go up to the patient, you suspect this. You know what self-restriction means? That you tell the patient, do not move your head. Then you go up there and you control it. So patients instructed to actually align their head and neck and actually to the umbilicus and not to move. No evidence of injury. Place the patient on a stretcher. If there's evidence of injury, and then you apply a cervical collar and place the patient on a stretcher. Now, nowadays, you can use a backboard. You don't have to use a backboard. There's a lot of controversy there was a lot of controversy. I don't know if there is nowadays. Patient can also be placed on the backboard or actually vacuum splint mattress. And a vacuum mattress is basically a device where you put the patient on there, you wrap the mattress, and you suction all the air out, causing it to become rigid. Okay. Now you find a patient that's outside. It might actually be difficult to find out what's wrong with them because they might actually be homeless or they're a drug addict or something. So you have to question them and determine if it's a medical or trauma patient. Now, let's say this guy gets stung by a bee, falls down, and gets hurt. Would this be a patient, a trauma patient, or a medical patient?
Trauma?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is that you have to realize when you're doing a patient assessment, your trauma patient is going to be a more detailed exam than your medical patient. A medical patient, you ask a lot of questions. A trauma patient, you look and find. This guy, what do you notice? Right.
Was that that's what's called open heart surgery?
Open heart surgery. He had a cabbage, what we call a cabbage. And he has a 12 EKG on him. And he's got oxygen. Is this a non-rebreathing mask, simple face mask, venturi tube, or is this nasal cannula?
Don't really consider those sides.
No, it's got a reservoir bag.
Just yeah.
Could be a partial or not or full non-rebreather mask. It cannot be a nasal cannula because that only goes through prongs in the nose. But good catch on checking his chest injury. I mean his scar. Now determine whether the patient is injured or ill. If he's injured, penetrating trauma, and it's a force that it basically where basically the skin itself that there's an open to that there's an opening or non-opening to the skin. Blunt trauma is considered by force and impact of the body, but doesn't actually penetrate the skin. So penetrating trauma tells you penetrating. It broke the skin. Non-penetrating or blunt trauma, it doesn't break the skin, gives you a bruise. The environment may actually offer clues to the patient or the patient is actually suffering from medical problems itself. This guy, what do you notice?
Looks either a stab or a shot into the stomach. It's a fetal position.
He's in a fetal position, which basically means that he might have actually got injured in the abdomen because do you all remember doing those exercises when you were in PE in high school? For those who remember what high school was, where they actually had you lying down on the floor and they asked you to elevate your legs about 12 inches from the floor. That's all that would be. What were those exercises for?
Just to make you breathe more. No?
Nope. To strengthen your abdominal muscles.
Oh, okay.
So when you get your abdominal muscles injured, your automatic thing is to lift your legs towards your abdomen so you don't stretch out those muscles, because if you stretch them out, it's going to hurt. This is a fetal position also. Somebody is suffering from, what do you call it? Appendicitis is going to be in the fetal position because the appendix is in the abdomen. Actually, one of the tests that we do is we ask them to elevate their legs straight up, and then you push it down, and they're going to feel a lot of pain. Which I never understood why they do that test. You could just look and find out, that they have it. You arrive at the scene. What do you notice in this patient?
Kind of sort of like out, just a little.
Yeah, well, this is a hospital bed in itself. So he might actually be a long-term patient. I really can't see what's on the table. But okay. Yeah. And obtain the chief complaint. What is the chief complaint? Well, the reason that they called you. I feel weak, I have a headache, I have chest pain. The reason that they call you, that's the chief complaint. And the only one that can tell you that is the patient or somebody that was there. And don't assume that the original complaint is the true chief complaint. Trauma patients may actually have observable chief complaint, like lacerated forehead or whatever. It is important to obtain a chief complaint from a medical patient. Because in trauma, you can see the injury. In medical patients, you have to determine.
Oh.
Okay. The following are life threats that actually require immediate management if found during information of your general impression. The airway that is not compromised by blood, vomitus, or secretions, the tongue, the bone, teeth, and other substances or objects. Obvious open wounds to the chest itself. Paradoxical movement. Now, do you guys remember what paradoxical movement is?
Paradoxical.
Paradoxical movement. I'll let you answer that. Okay, let me ask you a question. Are you going to find this on trauma patients or on medical patients? Let's break it down.
Let's see.
Well, in order to find out, you have to figure out what paradoxical movement is, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So paradoxical movement is when you have part of your rib cage going the opposite way of what your lungs are supposed to do. So if you inhale air in,
Oh,
your chest usually barrels out, right? But that
yeah.
section that's injured, which basically means there's a broken rib, goes inward instead of outward. And when you breathe out, it does the opposite. So it's paradoxic movement. So basically means that you have ruptured ribs in more than one place. So is this a trauma patient or a medical patient?
Trauma.
Trauma. Okay. Obvious open wounds to the chest, that there's like a stab wound, gunshot wound, or whatever. Paradoxical movement, major bleeding, a steadily flow splurting. If it's a steady flow, it's a venous bleed. If it's a splurting, it's a arterial bleed. Unresponsive with no breathing or no normal or an abnormal breathing or agonal or no breathing at all whatsoever. Identify immediate life threats during the general impression. Cardiac arrest must be recognized immediately. If they're unconscious, you try to shake them to wake up and they don't wake up. You touch them, they don't wake up. You check for pulse, they don't have one. Guess what? They're in cardiac arrest. Begin immediate chest compressions, open the airway and provide ventilations, and apply an AED so you can actually shock them. Okay. If you suspect a spinal injury, establish manual inline stabilization. Inline stabilization includes place one hand on each side of the head, bring the head to an inline position where it's the nose pointing towards the belly button, and place the head in a neutral position, which basically that's what it is. Now this guy's nose is pointing towards the belly button. And this guy is holding C-spine, which basically is holding the head so the head doesn't move. Perform a spine motion restriction. Self-restriction procedures, basically, remember we went over that one a little while ago. Instruct the patient not to move their head, and to actually basically put their nose in line with their belly button. Instruct them to actually to keep his toes in line with the navel also, and actually instruct the patient not to move his head or actually neck until So given further instructions. So until somebody actually goes up there and just answer yes or no questions, or do not shake your head. If necessary, log roll the patient after quickly checking the posterior body. Using line stabilization if spinal injury is possible. If you suspect spinal injury. Skills 1, this is a log roll right there. This patient is in supine position or prone position.
I think it's prone, no?
Prone, he's facing down. So you can't check their airway, breathing, and circulation unless you're facing towards you. So you're gonna log roll the patient. Now, notice his head. This guy is in charge of the whole body. So when they log roll him, he's gonna put the patient in neutral position. Or it's a nose facing the belly button. But you have to flip him towards you. See, now he's actually in that position. And this guy is the one that controls the count. 1, 2, 3, move. Now, basically, I think the slides were messed up. Okay. Assess level of responsiveness. Quickly assess the level of responsiveness using the AVPU mnemonic. Alertness and orientation. If the patient, his eyes are open and can actually speak, as you actually approach him, you might actually assume that the patient is alert. A patient can be alert, but agitated, confused, or actually disoriented. So AVPU, again, alert to verbal stimuli. He responds to painful stimuli, or he doesn't respond at all, which is unresponsive. Assess the level of responsiveness to verbal stimuli. The patient opens his eyes when you talk to him. If the patient does not speak, see if he will actually follow commands. And responsiveness to painful stimuli, you can actually pinch the patient, do a sternal rub, which is basically you get your knuckles and rub their sternum. That should wake up a dead person. If he doesn't respond to that, then they're basically unresponsive. Methods for applying painful stimuli is basically the trapezius or armpit pinch. You pinch the armpit. Supraorbital pressure, which is above the orbits. You press down on them. Sternal rub, which I mentioned, which is basically you rub the sternum itself. Nail bit pressure, which is your nail bits. You put pressure on them, pinch the webbing between the thumb and the finger itself. So it's like right in this region, and then wake them up if they're responsive. So at this point, this is basically a painful stimuli. This is that trapezius muscle right there.
Okay.
That supraorbital right there, you press right up below the eyebrow. This is a sternal rub. She's rubbing the sternum with her knuckles. And this is basically with the earlobe pinch. And I think there's a region right around this section right here in the middle that hurts a lot more if you press on it. Assess the level of responsiveness to a painful stimuli. The response to a painful stimuli is typically purposeful or non-purposeful. In other words, are they going to take your body? I mean, you know, if you're pinching them on their nose, are they going to hit you? Or are they going to basically move away from you? Purposeful is to try to get your hand away. And non-purposeful is basically when they move away from you. Movement towards the painful stimulus, blah, blah, blah. So flex and extension or posturing are abnormal processes. We're gonna go with flexion. Basically posturing are, which is decorticate and decerebrate. So decorticate and decerebrate are part of what you call posturing. This person, when you're having your arms towards the core of your body and your legs dented inward, that's decorticate. Why decorticate? Decor. They're going to the core of the body. decorticate.
Mhm.
This is decerebrate. Basically, the person's actually going outward. Okay. Decorticate, decerebrate. It usually deals with brain injuries. Responsiveness from painful stimuli. Problems with one type of painful stimuli always assess central painful stimuli. Peripheral stimuli may actually reach the spinal cord, but not the brain. So you have reflexes that will actually cause you to actually have some type of reaction. A patient who does not respond to verbal stimuli or painful stimuli, they're unresponsive. Duh. Unresponsive patients are a high risk priority to actually emergency care and transport. Unresponsive to verbal or painful stimuli can actually indicate the patient's inability to maintain their own airway. Document the level of responsiveness. Be specific to documenting level of responsiveness to establish a baseline set for vital signs themselves. Remember, what is a baseline vital signs?
Baseline.
Yeah, baseline vital signs.
Like,
It's that first set of vital signs that you take to compare every other vital sign to see if you're going, if you're doing it right, or is the patient getting better or they're getting worse. Oh, sorry. Okay. What did I skip? Oh yeah, there you go. Now, assess the airway. Okay, when you're assessing the airway, an occluded airway is an immediate life threat because they're not breathing, so they're not getting oxygen in. Okay, determine airway status on a responsive patient. If it indications of airway compromise might actually be stridor. Remember what stridor is, guys? What is stridor?
Stridor.
Stridor. That's abnormal lung sounds found in your trachea. High-pitched sounds found in your trachea. That means an airway occlusion at that level. Not at your lungs, but at the airway where your trachea is at. That's stridor. Okay. Difficulty speaking, and they can't talk in one sentence without having gasping for air. Gasping or non-speaking, they can't talk at all, and they're just looking at you like, do something about it. Okay. And the unresponsive or severely altered mental status patient, there is a high risk of airway compromise, and it's usually caused by what? The tongue.
The tongue.
Yes, it's not the one that you wear in your abdomen. It's actually your lengua. Okay, so at this point, assess the airway to open there. Remember that we went over the different ways to actually open up a travel. If you suspect C-spine, you have to do a modified jaw thrust on this guy, or a jaw thrust maneuver. If you don't suspect C-spine, you can do a head tilt chin lift. Manual maneuvers, suction or sweep or do finger sweeps. Use airway adjuncts. What are the airway adjuncts that we use, that we have? And I'm going to give you the acronyms.
Airway action.
OPA and NPA. What are they?
Oral and nasal.
Yeah, but what?
Oh. Nasal.
Oral pharyngeal airway and nasal pharyngeal airway. OPA and
Okay.
NPA. Okay, just remember those. Abdominal thrust, just in case, to dislodge anything, and then position the patient on their side if they're vomiting. How long do you suction for?
Qué tontera.
Okay, that's 5 to 15 seconds
30, 15 seconds.
on the way out only. And remember, you have to give them oxygen for 2. Now, if they don't have any, if their airways are occluded, then you don't worry about giving them oxygen because it's not going to get there. You need to get everything out of it. Okay. Snoring is caused by the tongue. You do manual maneuvers, which basically you can use airway adjuncts to displace the tongue. That's what they're for. Like an oropharyngeal airway and nasopharyngeal airway. Snoring, which is a rough snoring type sound on inspiration and on exhalation. Gurgling is if you have blood or any type of liquid within your throat. Crowing sounds like a crowing crow on inspiration, and that's basically an upper respiratory thing. In stridor, it's a harsh, high-pitched sound on inspiration. Indications of partial airway obstruction. You might have gurgling. Then you suction and position the patient on their side so they don't aspirate anything into the lungs. So again, how long do you suction for?
5 to 15.
Okay, on the way in or way out?
On the way out.
On the way out, thank you. Okay. Indications of partial airway obstruction, crowing or stridor with high-pitched inspiratory sounds indicate swelling to the muscles or muscle spasms of the airway. Manual maneuvers will actually not relieve the obstruction. Do not insert anything in the airway because you might actually cause it to swell a lot more. Determine at this point, which is basically after opening the airway, you determine if their breathing is adequate or inadequate. And how can you tell? So you find the lungs actually expanding and not expanding. Determine the need for early oxygen therapy or adequate breathing, and provide positive pressure ventilation with supplemental oxygen for inadequate breathing. Inadequate breathing basically is they have an inadequate rate or inadequate tidal volume, which tidal volume is how much air they get in. And inadequate basically is that they're actually, you get to see the lungs expand and collapse. Breathing, basically look for the following. Inadequate tidal volume, which basically means that their chest is not expanding as it's supposed to be. An abnormal respiratory rate, which is either too fast or too slow, which is bradypnea or tachypnea. Which is too fast?
Tachypnea?
Tachypnea. And bradypnea is too slow, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this person, what they're doing is they're looking at the chest. She's feeling the chest itself also, and seeing to see if there's air coming in and out so he can actually hear it and feel it on their cheeks. This guy just looks constipated. Okay. Look for retractions. What are retractions? That's when your accessory muscles start retracting or your intercostal muscles start retracting. You're using excessive muscle control to try to breathe in or out. That means that there's something obstructing it. Use accessory muscle, tracheal tugging. Tracheal tugging is where your trachea, you get to see the middle portion actually sinking in. Pale, cool, clammy skin, cyanosis, pulse oximeter less than 94%. An asymmetry of the chest wall, one chest might actually rise and the other one not, or you might actually find a flail segment. Listen and feel. Listen for air movement and feel for escape of warmth, humidified air. And this one basically is like that old test that they used to do. And I laugh because they actually used to do it. They used to get a mirror and put it under their nose. And if it didn't fog up, they're not breathing. And if it fogged up, they're breathing. Absence of breathing, no chest wall movement or sensation of moving air, inadequate breathing, insufficient rate, tidal volume, and oxygen, or other signs of respiratory distress. Adequate breathing. If the chest is rising and falling adequately, you hear and feel good air exchange, the respiratory rate is adequate, and there is no evidence of serious respiratory distress, assume that the patient breathing is adequate. Oxygenation. Okay, look for hypoxia or hypoxemia. Hypoxia is lack of oxygen. Hypoxemia is what you get to see, like cyanosis or whatever. Poor perfusion, heart failure, or respiratory distress. Question. Let's see who gets it right. Click on the item below that best describes the purpose of the primary assessment. To obtain baseline vital signs, finding all signs of injury or illness, finding and treating immediate life threats, or determining whether the additional resources are needed. So what is primary assessment? The main thing. And you should get this one right if you're paying attention. Let's ask Soraya, which is not your name. Pedro, what is the answer? Earth to Pedro.
Letter C.
What?
You
Okay,
look
that
at
confirm.
everything.
Yeah, basically finding also, nope, actually not B, it's C. Finding and treating immediate life threats, airway, breathing, and circulation. Remember, those are life threats that you can control. Primary assessment. Finding and treating immediate life threats. Okay, assessment of circulation during the primary assessment should occur in the following sequence. Assess for presence or absence of pulse. Assess for possible major bleeding. Assess skin color, temperature, and condition, and assess capillary refill. How do we check capillary refill?
Mm.
Oh, this should be second nature to you guys already. How do we check for capillary refill?
Capillary,
You pinch on the nail bit
de los ojos.
for a few seconds,
Ah,
let
capillary.
go, and within 2 seconds, it should go back to normal size, right?
Mhm.
So we know that one, right? And now we're gonna have to start from the beginning. Now,
Mhm.
this person's checking radial pulse. You can also check carotid pulse. You can also check femoral pulse, which is in the legs. On a kid, you actually check for brachial pulse, which is right under the armpit, or not underarm, right there. Okay. Quickly determine if the pulse is present or not. And we're checking for 10 seconds. If you find it, yes, yay. If you don't, then they don't have a pulse. The pulse, check to see if the pulse is regular, for regular or irregular, and how strong it is. Identify major bleeding. So do a quick. God, I'm getting you all syndrome. Do a quick
Mhm.
overall look at the body and see if there's any major bleeding. Okay. If you find bright red blood that's spurting out, that is arterial bleeding. If you find a dark red and oozing out, that is venous. That's from your veins. Okay, which is more dangerous?
Veins.
Nope. Arterial. Well,
Artery.
actually, veins, kind of, but arterial is more important because you can lose the blood a lot faster. It's spurting out.
Oh, okay.
So check for major bleeding. So you check all the body to see if they're bleeding majorly. He's constipated and she's actually ready to do poopy.
Mhm.
Now you find some major bleeding on the leg. Does this look arterial or venous?
I think arterial, I would say.
I would say venous because I
Venous.
don't see it flying
Venus.
out. Because if it would have been arterial, you would have seen splurge all over the place.
Ya hubiera habido un charcón grande, ¿no? Si hubiera sido
Yeah.
arterial.
See, it would have had, could have gone fishing in there.
Mhm.
Okay, now in this one, you're checking for temperature. And you check with the back part of your hand. You can do the abdomen or you can do the hand, depending. Now at this point, look for skin color. Observe the mucous membranes, which are found in your eyes, inside the mouth, or right inside the nose, to see if they're actually pale or mottled. Remember the word mottled, what does it mean? Pale is off white, but what is mottled?
Model.
Remember your
Nunca vi
giraffe.
eso. Oh, spots así, or
Yeah, like the skin of a giraffe, it's darker spots and lighter spots. That's mottled right there,
oh, okay.
which basically means you're going through shock. Cyanotic is blue. You have no little oxygen. Red. Now, what's the difference between having little oxygen and shock? Let's see if you understand the physiology behind it.
Little oxygen or shock.
Yeah.
Mm.
Shock, you're losing blood and blood pressure.
Oh,
Okay. With cyanotic, basically what? You don't have any oxygen in your blood, but you're not losing blood.
mhm.
What is the difference? So one of them is going to be an airway problem, the other is going to be a bleeding problem, a cardiac problem. So
Okay.
pale and mottled, shock basically means that you're losing blood. And cyanosis, you're losing oxygen and you don't, I mean, you still have the blood. If it's overly red flush, there's vasodilation, which basically means you're going through an allergic reaction or your blood vessels don't have any control. And if you're yellow, basically means you have liver dysfunction, also known as jaundice. Now, if your eyes are yellow, but your body's not yellow or it's pink, then you have something that's called ictericia. Ictericia. But if your body is yellow, then you have jaundice.
Hmm.
Temperature. If it's hot, cool, cold, or cool and clammy. So hot basically means you might be under a hot environment or elevated temperatures. If it's cool, you might be in a cool environment or decreased perfusion, in other words, your body's going through shock. If you're cold, you might actually be having frostbite or hypothermia. And if you're cold and clammy, you're going through shock. Basically, cold and clammy is you're sweaty and cold. Okay, skin condition, dry. You might be dehydrated. You might be going through a heat stroke. You might be going through spinal shock or medical conditions that might, some medications can actually cause you to have that. If you're moist, environment, exertion, shock, or medical conditions or medications. I was going to say capillary refill. I'm telling you, man, it's more reliable in infants than in children. Most reliable in room temperature, and alone does not provide an accurate determination and a perfusion status. So basically, capillary refill is that you're going through shock if you have a delayed capillary refill. Remember, there's only how many seconds do you wait to check for capillary refill?
Like, can 5 no? Or
No. 2 seconds.
okay.
Now, if you're pregnant, you can wait up to 4 seconds. If you're older than 60 or 70, you can wait more than 2 seconds. Okay? but normal should be 2 seconds or less. If they have more than 2 seconds, then uikukui, you need to panic. Capillary refill, and this one, you're doing a blanch test. So basically, you're pressing on the skin and you let go. And it should turn back to pink within 2 seconds. Okay. Shock, a life-threatening condition. Is treatment needs to begin during the primary assessment, basically giving them oxygen and basically keeping them warm or giving them chest compressions. Okay. Establish patient priorities. Now, what does that mean? Is this a load and go patient or is this a stay and play patient? So if you can't control the airway, breathing, and circulation, it's a load and go. If they're unconscious for any amount of time or they went unconscious, load and go. Okay. So basically, that's about it. Okay. Let me see what time it is. Hold on, guys. Okay, I'll tell you what. Before we get into this, the secondary assessment, I'm gonna go ahead and let you absorb the first 2 sections before we go on to the secondary assessment. So what I want you to do is concentrate on the primary survey, on scene size up and primary survey and primary primary assessment. Remember, primary survey is different than primary assessment. Is a primary survey, you're checking to see if they're conscious or unconscious, or any level in between. And the primary assessment is checking airway, breathing, and circulation. And what's scene size up? Check your environment to say there are any dangers to you, your partner, your patient, and the bystanders. How many ambulances do we need? Blah, 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 blah. So concentrate on those, memorize those, and then on Wednesday, we'll continue with a secondary assessment, which is a little bit more detailed. Okay? So do you guys have any questions? I'm gonna go ahead and let you go. It's a lot of information, guys. You guys, I need to I don't know if I put up the assignments yet, but I'm gonna make sure that I put them up tonight.
Okay.
We can start working on the homework. All right?
Okay.
Questions?
No.
No, nada.
Entonces, nos vemos el Wednesday.
Pedro, tú.
Pedro no tiene questions.
No, sir.
All right. Entonces nos vemos el Wednesday
Okay.
a las 5 de la mañana.
Oh, muy temprano.
No.
Ni los gallos esos despiertos a esa hora.
No, hombre, si no están despiertos ahorita, imagínate en la mañana.
No, aquí estamos al 100.
Okay. A 100 kilómetros o millas
Ahora de 100 y pasaditos.
o centímetros.
¿Eh?
O centímetros. Anyway, so I'll see you guys on Wednesday. You guys behave yourselves.
Okay.
Sure.
You're gonna
Vamos.
put the assignment.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Okay,
post
sir.
them up as soon as I get out of class.
Okay.
All right.
Bye, sir.
You guys have a good
Bye,
day.
sir.
Okay, bye.
Nos vamos.
Good night, guys. Bye.
Bye. Estamos felices.
Bye.
Bye.
Merry Christmas a todos.
Madre, igualmente.
Igual.
Good night. Good night, John Boy.
Night.
You guys don't remember the Waltons tampoco?
Yeah.
Hijo de su-
Eran como 15 huercos.
Hijo, no. Good night, John Boy. No, para cuando terminar ya era la mañana.
Sí.
Then I'll see you guys on Wednesday.
Al estamos. Luego.